So you want to learn the hardest hero in Overwatch, huh? You're insane for wanting to try, but I gotta respect it. Kick off your shoes, and let's get ready to jump into breaking down some seriously beastly tank players. Today we're taking a look at Mickey from the Dallas Fuel, Chrono Dota, Tier 2 Pro Legend, and Yeatle, famous for mastering Wrecking Ball. All of them will be linked in the description, be sure to check them out. First, a mentality check, jumping into learning Sigma. He's an entirely new type of character in Overwatch. You may be used to characters being simple to learn but hard to master. Sigma's just hard. He has what's called a skill cliff, not a skill curve, meaning you kind of have to learn everything at once to be able to do anything, and even the basics of his kit are extremely complicated, and that's where we'll start. Sigma's primary attack, Hyperspheres, is what makes him such a deadly threat. If you master it, you can pretty easily rack up the most damage on your team, killing everything in your path. The first thing you must learn about Hyperspheres is mastering distance control. Its max range is 20 meters, which is the distance it's going to explode at. Direct hits will get you the most damage, dealing both the impact and the explosion for 60 damage in orb, 120 for the both of them, and that's why you essentially are a DPS with a shield. With a massive AoE on the splash and devastating burst damage, this is the main way Sigma frags. So obviously you do have to aim and lead your projectile shots like any other, but it's the awkwardness of the distance control that you're going to have to master. There's a perfect sweet spot that you want to try to get, and it'll either be at or slightly below 20 meters of distance away from your target. Look how Chrono Dota mirrors the distance of the enemy Ana who's trying to get away. As he sees her back up, he presses forward, maintaining about 20 meters of distance between him and her. This ability to mirror your enemy's movement is going to be key in allowing your shots to maintain lethality as you shoot them. That's the dream range, and the longer you're able to keep in step with your rotations with your enemy, the more you're going to see your damage output skyrocket. But it's not always that easy. Sometimes your enemies are going to be at an uncomfortably close medium range outside of the splash explosion distance, and in that case, you must be hitting direct hits, or it's just going to end up bouncing past your enemy and whiffing. Because of this, selecting targets that are easy to hit will be important for you, and notice here how Yeatle places his crosshair in anticipation of where the McCree's likely to run to, slightly leading it in forward, and when he reads the animation, then his shots easily can punish. The Mercy's a bit harder to hit though, flying across the screen, but with a combination of our rock and explosion damage at the magic range, we were able to get her critical, requiring her to run from the fight. And it's landing these shots like this that turns a fight back. This was a 4v6 at the start of it. Yeatle's damage output was key in turning the fight around. But the Hyperspheres can do more than even that. The way they bounce can be a downside and make them difficult to use, but it's also an asset for you to utilize. When a target runs away around a corner, bouncing and bank shotting them in can pressure them out even with just the splash damage alone. And also key, because they bounce, kind of like Junkrat's grenades, you can bank shot them from the floor in cases where a direct connection might feel kind of awkward. It's going to take many hours of mastery of really getting the hang of when to use what type of shot. I like the ground bank shot when I'm above the target, but they're also kind of a little too close for a normal range direct. But it also will be matchup specific as well. Remembering, of course, short range bounces to manage where the big explosion radius hits will get you more reliable damage, but going for the riskier, easier to dodge direct hits do more damage overall, obviously. Okay, that's just one ability. Now to add in other things to the mix, you'll especially want to keep in mind that the fire rate of Hyperspheres has such a long delay in between each shot that you don't want to rush your shots if you don't have the aim secured for them yet, but also in between the downtime of lobbing out the volley, if the enemy's too close, you should be trying to sneak in melee hits, and if it's off cooldown, you really want to sneak in a boulder because Accretion does 80 damage no matter what. Hitting a knockdown can set yourself up to hit both Hyperspheres in a volley, capping out at 200 damage in a combo. Landing this straight up deletes squishies and is Sigma's scariest tool in a duel. Keep in mind, the Accretion rock is absolutely massive. It feels like you're aiming, I don't know, Winston's primary fire or something. It's huge at close range, and at medium and far, it's the biggest projectile in the game, although it does move slowly, so you want to be sure to lane it and cover the maximum surface area of, like, let's say a doorway or whatever is framing your target and aim for that, because if it even slightly swipes them, they're going to get hit by it. Okay, so that's the fragging aspect of Sigma. Now let's talk about his tanking components and the flow of playing him and taking space. When playing Sigma, you have to bravely box your enemy in, remembering you have two abilities that allow you to push the shield forward to make space for your team, get them to start shooting at it, then walk in front of it with kinetic grasp, absorbing most things in the game while you continue to press W to get where you want to go. So that's how you take space, but it's important to remember how to manage your resources once you get the space you want. You see, Sigma is way different than the Orisa meta we're used to because he doesn't have an outrageous amount of shielding that he can continuously put down. Instead, just like a DPS character, he has to get to cover, get good angles, then fight from there. The shield and kinetic grasp are a means to an end to set up his damage angles, as opposed to a character like Orisa, who sets up more of a hard point bunker that's expected to take a bunch of damage. So with that being the case, in the middle of doing all your other skill shots to land damage, you want to attempt to put your shield out actively to block big cooldowns, interrupt follow-up of focus fire, but you cannot leave it out continuously. What the best Sigma players do is send out their shield and retract it constantly as they're fighting in the brawl. Doing this baits the enemy into thinking they have windows to shoot big cooldowns at you like this Roadhog's hook, but that's when you whip out your shield again, maintaining more health on it than it otherwise would if you left it out, still being able to block that cooldown. Now remember, the shield isn't as durable as Reinhardt or Orisa's, but it's this flexibility and speed of deployment that gives it even more potential than theirs does. Because remember, you're doing all these other things while also actively going out and blocking things. And we'll elaborate more on this point when we return to Sigma's key matchups, but for now, we'll continue down the mechanics route and cover his big ultimate, Gravitic Flux, which, like everything else in his kit, is also pretty complicated to use. Now, the key fundamental of using this is remembering that just like Graviton Surge, if your teammates don't have the damage angles to follow up on your crowd control, well, nothing's gonna die. There's plenty of things in the game that sustain and protect teammates that can keep the enemy team alive if you're not careful. So the way that you get past that is with surgical target priority. You want to try to target squishies that don't have cooldowns that can escape the ultimate, because Gravitic Flux does a bit of damage on impact, but on the slam down will do half of the affected character's health pools, which is a very convenient number because while inside your ultimate you are allowed to use hyperspheres while flying, so setting up shots to connect with 200 damage worth of burst is what you want to look to do. And to best do that, you want to try to hit two different animations. When hit by the ult, targets are suspended in air, and you'll want to practice getting used to how high that is, and adjusting your flight path to put yourself in that ideal range that we talked about in the first section of the video. Get yourself in the money 20-meter distance to hit the target as they reach the apex of the climb, fire then, or you can wait for the time when they get slammed, because there is a small window where they're not really allowed to move at full speed. When that 100 damage hits, then you also can pound another volley at them there. Don't get too fancy, try to hit them mid-stride as they're falling down. There's no point to that. Really get it in the muscle memory and the tempo of how you play with the ultimate to time the shot when they get raised, and then set yourself up for the next volley as they fall. The most effectiveness I've seen out of this isn't necessarily going for the big ultimates grabbing the whole team, but in fact, oftentimes it's best to just go at those squishy targets you know you can kill, especially if you have extra shields after just using kinetic grasp perhaps. Pop that ultimate and go assassinate those targets because you know the DPS on your team won't. Keep in mind as well, it's the squishies that really give Sigma trouble. If tanks are left over, he has the tools to beat most of them pretty easily fighting on an objective. His abilities are easier to hit on tanks after all. He's got a dynamic barrier, so once the fight kind of breaks out, as long as the rest of your mid-fight mechanics are good, you shouldn't feel afraid of any tank head-to-head. And instead, use them as an ult battery to get your Gravitic Flux again for the next team fight. There's other cute tricks you can do with it, of course. Because you can fly, it allows you to go more aggro, get up on top to high ground to surprise enemies that don't see it coming. Also, because it's such a big area of effect and has a bit of a delay to it, it's not bad for catching dive engages either. Big Genji Blade coming your way, tossing Grav at Genji Blade was already a good play, and Genji can reflect that. He can't reflect Gravitic Flux, so it also can be a good way to punish when the enemy is hard committing onto you. Just keep in mind, you can't use any of your abilities while in this, so you want to have your shield set, and maybe even have tossed out your other cooldowns first before popping it to get the maximum value out of your character while you're stuck in the ult animation. Keep in mind as well, while in the ultimate, if you die or get stunned out of it, it is possible to lose it. However, as long as you click the selection, even if you get stunned or killed, it will still go off. So usually it's better to try to pounce it out immediately before the enemy has time to react or focus you down. Not to mention, they hear the voice line well ahead of time, so they'll be running away anyway. So I think the faster you lock it on with its huge area of effect, the less likely you are to whiff it. Now, for the last section of the video, I want to talk about his key matchup, which, as I've been saying since he's come out, is that he is a monster up against Bunker. Reviewing these high-tier tank players' gameplay has only emboldened my opinion in that regard, and it's thanks to all of his gameplay being uniquely powerful up against characters who think they can just stand around and live forever. No, he does the best damage in the game. The only reason it's difficult is that it's hard to hit. But you want to put a static shield or an incredibly slow horse in front of him, well, it's not hard to slowly get up to your magical 20 meters range and just pound into that barrier while using cover, maintaining your barrier. Now, Orisa play may develop in order to compensate for this and really play outside of Sigma's key ranges, but I think he's too flexible to find this matchup to be troublesome in any case. In all the examples I've seen, either from my own gameplay or watching the high-level players, because Sigma can use his abilities to get to a corner and he's effectively a DPS, well, this is the multi-DPS dream that used to beat Bunker before 222 role lock was implemented. Sigma just is a DPS in the tank role. So because of that, you finally do have enough shield break to outmatch Orisa. And once Sigma is able to get to cover, he does far more with it than the Orisa comp can, because he lobs massive projectiles that do tons of damage, and really their best tool is typically halt and hook, but shields can block that as well. Just whipping it out like all the other cooldowns we can catch, as discussed earlier, means that they're just fighting a losing battle that they should eventually drop over time. Let me show you an example of what I mean. Here, the Orisa comp has the map on Nepal Village. Watch how Yeatle peeks a corner to lob his damage out, but is mostly maintaining his barrier. He does have to pop it out in order to not die. Doesn't want to get shot too much, obviously, but largely he can maintain it while the Orisa's is exposed. Once that barrier cracks and goes down, the enemy's forced to reposition, allowing him time to move up and get further advanced cover. Then, rotating around the bunker, he's just continuously shelling into it, nailing the Orisa, and the splash damage is no joke either. It's massive, hits multiple targets, you're just Junkrat with a shield, meaning the slow Orisa comp is forced to just keep backing up over and over, and although we will eventually catch a death here at the end of the clip, the damage has already been done. We have all the space, without even really needing to do a whole lot, just advancing our character and playing the basics of Sigma is able to get this done. So, pretty much any map where there's cover that Sigma can push to, you can set up his damage to destroy enemy barriers and pressure down setups. His playstyle is definitely super weak to getting rushed down. If a Reinhardt presses W on him, he's very uncomfortable and not durable enough to take the beating. Because he has self-regenerating shields, he much rather play the corner peek game, much like Zenyatta does, able to self-heal some of his HP. But up against a defensive Reinhardt, I would say the same type of shield pressure could still work, forcing the defense to go aggro on you in that case, meaning that really his only big counter is dive tanks going at his backline, either Winston or Wrecking Ball leading the charge, knocking him out of the play or zoning him out with a Winston bubble. Those tanks do farm his team because he's too slow to be able to react, but also I'd say don't underestimate his power in being able to deal with squishy flanker characters. Sure, Genji Tracer might be able to farm him, but if he hits a rock and skill shots, they're done just like anybody else. Doomfist and Wrecking Ball have enough HP to be able to take a hit and keep going, slamming their big cooldowns on him and his team, so I would say those are the biggest characters to look out for to be hard counters to you. Also, Symmetra can easily farm your barrier if you're putting it out too frequently. Also remember, her beam, as well as all the other beam damage, at least currently, goes through his kinetic grasp ability. So Mei, Zarya, Moira, all the beam damages can't be absorbed or turned into shields, which will give him the most trouble, but his playstyle doesn't really require for kinetic grasp to get value though. It's more about getting his team space and setting himself up to do massive damage. And with any luck, if you're able to use this video to hone your skills and harness gravity just like Sigma himself, you'll be able to rack up the gold damage medals with no problem and filling the kill feed with your enemy's battle tags. I hope you did find it useful, and if you did, please be sure to leave the video a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. Videos like these take too many hours to create. We of course do love making them, so if you appreciate us putting the time in, be sure to hit the video with a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for your Overwatch. We'll see you guys next time.